Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Friday, March 11th, 2022. Is that some sort of a thing? Yeah, no, I guess not. Okay, it's not even just ones and twos. Just checking the numerology for the morning. I've never done a goddamn thing with the numerology, but hey, today may be the day. You never know when something exciting and new is going to happen. The Kagro in the Morning show is live now. That we know. That's new and exciting. Thanks, Bill, for reminding me that I needed to do that. Yes, let's see what he's got on tap for us today, because why not? We'll just take his cue here. The truck drivers, true, right. The truck drivers in D.C. unsuccessfully blocking traffic are upset that the resident car drivers in D.C. are successfully blocking them. That's true. That's exactly what's happening. If Kagro X, hi, that's me, everybody, can untangle that logic, you all get a donut. And why not? Let's just, why don't we just front you the donut now, and you eat it, and if by the end of the show I haven't untangled the logic, you give me the donut back. Deal? Okay. I don't know if that's going to work out. But consider the donut a non-fungible token. Somehow we're all millionaires. Boom. I don't know. That sounds good. It's a plan. We can go forward with it. As a matter of fact, we have something for that, because Greg has sent us an article this morning from the Defector, not the Defecator, that's what it looks like, but it's the Defector, and apparently a rather humorous take on the whole truck rally convoy-ish thing. Yeah, they've failed to make it onto the road the other day because of rain. I don't know what they did yesterday. They're upset because people are giving them the finger or something, and I don't know. I don't know. I read this morning on Twitter, and that's the only real source of anything anymore, that they are upset about something. Zach Patrizio, I don't know whether he puts the little TZ hitch in it or not, but Zachary Patrizio, who has been covering them for days for the Daily Beast, says, actually said yesterday, at 10:15 last night, the People's Convoy is growing increasingly upset with Beltway drivers, so much so that organizer Brian Braz, I don't know, remember him, B-R-A-S-E, told truckers tonight they could escalate their complaints about commuters being, quote, bad actors by flooding 911. I'm not entirely certain what they mean by that, but there's an explanation offered. DC traffic does not like us, he said. And the suggestion to flood 911 apparently came after an upset crowd began claiming to Braze that Maryland State Police wasn't, it says wasn't, but weren't, depending on how you want to construct the sentence, but the entity known as the Maryland State Police was not answering their non-emergency line, which I guess is pound 77. Which, is that a problem? Because it's not an emergency, right? You're supposed to answer it for public relations purposes. So they were going to go to 911, I guess, to tell people that three teenage girls in a car have given us the finger. And I don't know what they're going to do then. Call Homeland Security, I guess. I'm not sure what they think they're entitled to there, but the answer usually is anything they want. Whether or not you want to choose to deliver it to them, why, that's up to you. So, but that's the basic story. They are upset that they came to block traffic, but instead traffic is blocking them. And they now realize how frustrating it is to have a bunch of maniacs block your access to wherever it is you're going for unknown reasons. And they're very upset. And they, I don't know what. I guess, you know what you should do? You should drive to Ottawa and apologize to the residents of Ottawa on behalf of truckers internationally. Why not? Go ahead. That's what you should be doing. But apparently they're still hanging around, and I'm not sure why that is. If they're wise, they'll get the hell out of Dodge ASAP. There's a lot of lingo in that. I'm very hip with the lingo. All the kids are saying, get out of Dodge ASAP. Anyway, kids have any idea what they mean by Dodge? Like, don't drive a Dodge. I wouldn't anyway, they say, but No, okay, never mind. The kids will never understand it. I don't even understand it. I'm like post-Western myself. But okay, anyway, the idea is they ought to get out of town quickly. Weather is on its way, and as you know, they don't react well with the weather. So a winter storm on the way, and not supposed to be a major hit for the D.C. area, although up in Hagerstown, I guess, it's far enough north and west that they could get a different weather pattern, and a gigantic winter storm is in store for probably other people. I hope other people, because tomorrow we got some early morning driving to do. But if rain kept them off the Beltway the other day, this will pretty much shut them down. And also, of course, at the root of the whole thing was that they were coming to protest various COVID restrictions, almost all of which were gone before they started driving, but they're still here, and something. Anyway, would you like to know what's still going on in the convoy? I guess the defector piece will explain it with a wry sense of humor, as the review that I've been seeing elsewhere. I haven't had a chance to read this yet, but Albert Borneko, Burneko, Burn-Eco, I don't know. Well, basically, we're starting off right in the headline. We have to back off of the headline because we need our little bleepy button. I don't have a button with that sound in it. So, anyway, I truly cannot believe how dumb this convoy stuff is, essentially, is the headline. But, you can imagine what the word is. I should get some sort of bleep sound effect. I don't really have anything. I should isolate the Trump fart from.
We found a way in other states.
From
Excuse me.
I tried to isolate that. Believe me, he's talking over it. It's very rude, preventing me from using it. Oh, I can use the Armando almost crashing sound effect because it's road based, right? I don't know what that was. But anyway, let's see how that would work. I truly cannot believe how dumb this convoy is. It's a little too long, I guess. All right. Well, anyway, by now you're likely aware of and possibly exhausted by the dumb trucker convoy protest thing. It's the trucker convoy. The protest is dumb. We're not saying anything about the truckers, although I have seen some interviews. And in fact, that's embedded right here. You probably have seen this video as well. First, there was the dumb thing in Canada. Then various abortive dumb things in the United States. Truckers in trucks being dumb and pointlessly obstructive together and for unclear purposes. Some kind of aggrieved, incoherent, Trumpist rage brain tantrum. Who knows? Certainly none of them. A representative sample is offered here, and what is herein embedded? Do we want to even try to call this up and play it so that we can all hear it? You may have seen this thing from the social media presence of, what would we call them? Satirical comedy team, The Good Liars, who love to stage all kinds of fun and weird stunts, including doing, stand-up reporter on the street interviews here with one of the truckers, asking them the question of what specific issues are you really concerned about right now, and getting an interesting response on there, and then recording it and disseminating on their TikTok channel. I'm gonna roll some of this.
Are you really concerned about right now?
I don't want them to digitize us.
You don't want them what?
To digitize us. I don't want to take medicine that'll hurt people.
What was the word you used though? I haven't heard that.
Digital.
Digitile? And what does that mean?
They're trying to make us robots. They're trying to make it where we have no choice in nothing, to where they can control us from what they put in our bodies.
And eventually we'll actually be robots?
According to what they're saying, not robots, but according to what they've already got a full man-made working female robot.
Oh dear. Well, I don't know what the hell she's talking about. Although I suspect she's talking about like maybe sex robots, which I think they do have. But I don't think they can drive trucks. I don't know that for sure. But anyway, some real difficulty in understanding just even what this trucker had to say. Difficulty even discerning the pronunciation of the word, or whether it's a fake word or her misreading of a real word. Like, was she trying to say she was opposed to being digitized? Or I don't want them to digitize us, and it became like digitile, and I wasn't sure whether she was saying digitalis, which, isn't that that's a drug name, right? You were talking about the other digitalis, but I don't want them to digitile us. But then with her accent, it was like digital. I can't tell. Anyway, our fake reporter comedy guy also couldn't. I mean, he didn't have to write anything in the bit. He just, goes over the fact that we don't understand what the hell she's saying. And then she kind of almost makes a save, like, they're going to actually turn us into robots. Well, not robots. It's just that they're going to make it so that we have no choices and we can only do what they say. Oh, okay. So oppression, tyranny, I guess is what you're talking about. Yeah, but I mean, by, electronic means or something. It's very clear that, she's buried in some sort of weird conspiracy theory. But what can you tell from any of this? I don't know. By the way, she's in a cab marked SS Carrier, which I assume is not, the Nazi SS, but you never know with these guys. SS Carrier, Louisville, Texas. And watch out for being digitized, I guess. Yes, the piece continues. The threat of being digitized into a robot. Glad we cleared that up. Anyway, lately, as you may have seen, there's the dumb thing where a bunch of dummy truckers with paranoid right-wing brain soup politics are driving in circles around Washington, D.C. on the Capitol Beltway, Interstate 495, in what they imagine is an act of protest against, like, people agreeing that it's good, or at least not evil, to take reasonable precautions against contracting COVID-19, or anybody in the government doing literally anything at all to help or something. They've gotten lots of bewildered and or ominous media coverage for it. Much of this coverage has done these dolts the immense favor of pretending they have actual actionable demands or even clear complaints, other than that the world generally isn't enough like how they want it to be. And that's basically what it comes down to, because no one can identify anything. And as many chances as you give them to identify their demands, their interests, their fears, they still can't do it. What are you worried about? Just tell me. What are you worried about? Fill in the blank. Digitile. Well, I don't know what to do with that. Much of the rest of the coverage has politely declined to address the subject of what these morons want or claim to want, in cringing both sidesist fear of seeming to do a bias in describing truthfully a ludicrous, incoherent spasm of entitled foot stomping. None of the coverage I've seen has concerned itself with the logistics. Okay. Now, this is, like I said, this is Greg's proxy rant. The sort of thing that I am sure that he would agree feels good, but probably wouldn't deliver himself because he's, too concerned about people and likes to give people a chance to speak up and be heard, and then politely disagree with them and outvote them. It's his approach. But in case that worries you or frustrates you, you can be clear that he's the one that sent this. He said, you should read this on the air. Okay, and I believe he would have read it on the air, too. I don't think he would have been afraid of doing that. He's done this before. The truckers congregated at the Speedway in Hagerstown, Maryland, which I don't even know why there is one there, but there is. When they arrived last week in what press coverage very generously has tended to call the D.C. area, it's like they're taking their cues from the real estate people. The D.C. side of Hagerstown, famously around here, what did we used to see? Homes advertised for sale in what? The D.C. side of, was it Warrenton they were trying to sell? I don't know. Not a D.C. suburb, really. I mean, like an hour and 20 minutes, I would say, probably, to drive, to commute in the morning. Anyway, you get the idea. And that's on a good day, honestly. I mean, it can take an hour and 20 minutes from here. This is barely a D.C. suburb. All right, well, anyway, very generously calling us the D.C. area. They rallied there for a couple of days, I gather, before heading toward D.C. to circle the Beltway, which, as far as I can tell, they've been doing daily for the past few days. Today, he notes, it was yesterday, I think, Ted Cruz is with them. Wow, how nice for them. I hope he hasn't been digitized. Or maybe I hope he has been. I'm not sure. I don't know what to think. What I had not quite registered until this morning is that apparently at the end of each day of this protest of driving in a large circle around the most miserably congested highway in the country, they have been driving back to Hagerstown. That makes this, by miles, the absolute stupidest thing I've ever heard of. I see. Okay, and now I see what he means. But although I like my reading of it, he means, though, this makes this by miles the absolute stupidest thing. But I'm thinking about the mileage that they're actually putting in. But mile for mile, this is definitely the dumbest thing ever. Readers from outside the wider D.C. area may not understand this, or may get a misleading impression from coverage that grants Hagerstown a place in, quote, the D.C. area. Google Maps might clear it up a little when you see that the Hagerstown Speedway sits approximately 68 miles from the nearest point of the Capitol Beltway in Bethesda, Maryland. And remember, the Capitol Beltway, of course, doesn't actually enter into D.C. except for that 300-yard stretch on the Wilson Bridge, which is on the other side of the Beltway anyway. So they are a good long way from D.C. They're really a good long way from the Beltway, period, quite honestly. So I guess that explains why there were people waving flags from overpasses on 95 North, some like 80, 90 miles south of D.C. last weekend. I guess they just have maybe they don't know. I don't know where D.C. is. I think we should just wave flags in the East Coast somewhere. I-95 is probably a good bet. Let's do it. Well, anyway, 68 miles is a pretty long way on just about any road to be driving back and forth each day, especially when you're doing it just to drive in a circle for a while. Even people who experience 136 miles of round-trip driving only in the context of the straight and largely empty interstates of, like, northeastern Wyoming might at least wonder whether there's any place nearer than 68 miles away from which to stage your pointless daily circle driving. Wow. And this is a lot. 136 miles of driving just back and forth, plus the 65-mile loops of the Beltway. That is a lot of gas to burn. And a bad time to be doing it, too. Anyway, the piece continues. I live about 3 miles off the only realistic route from the Hagerstown Speedway to the Capitol Beltway. I interact with that route nearly daily. I am also a middle-aged dad, which means I have put more than normal amounts of thought into issues relating to commuting and the relative merits of various routes for getting places by car. Thus, it is with the utmost confidence that I write the following. And remember what Greg always says about the D.C. area. Elections are won and lost on traffic issues, right? But he goes on to say, the way to get to D.C. from anywhere in Washington County, Maryland, where Hagerstown is, especially in a big truck, is to take Interstate 270. Familiar in this house, which stretches around 35 miles from the city of Frederick at its outer end to Bethesda, where it terminates at the Beltway. And to get to the Frederick end of I-270 from Hagerstown, you must take Interstate 70. That's around 27 more miles. And then what's this here? Maybe a screen grab from something? I don't know. This is in a different font, at the very least. I-70 runs concurrent with the older U.S. Route 40, as both roads pass through Hagerstown, and they divide again between there and Frederick. Then they meet back up and overlap again through Frederick. Theoretically, you could stay on the slower and more meandering Route 40 for the 20-mile or so stretch between the two towns, where the roads split apart, but this would be a true chaos choice in any circumstances other than I-70 being jammed up by a wreck, which it sometimes is. It brings me such joy to share this terrible knowledge with the readers of Defector.com. The crucial things to know about I-270 are, 1, it is the only plausible route for anybody west or northwest of D.C. to approach the city. That's true. It is also the only significant road connecting the D.C. area to I-70. It makes this connection via an ugly, tangled interchange, somehow involving like 4 other major roads. This interchange grinds to a near standstill at least once on probably 7 out of 10 weekdays. Number 3, I-70 is the major cross-country interstate connecting the industrial Midwest to the extremely wealthy, busy, and congested D.C. metropolitan area. That's a lot of responsibility heaped onto I-270. Even if this were all I-270 did, it would be a very busy road. And we haven't gotten into the daily commuters in Montgomery County, Maryland, yet. Montgomery being the more close-in, and that's where Bethesda and other close-in, more familiar D.C. suburbs are. I-270 is the primary daily route of all the commuters in all of the dense, prosperous D.C. suburbs. Rockville, Gaithersburg, Germantown, etc. All just across the Potomac River from where I am in Loudoun County, but no way to get from here to there directly. By the way, no bridges allowed. That's a measure for you of just how dense and prosperous those suburban developments in Montgomery County, Maryland are. No one will allow a bridge to be built. Everyone needs that bridge, but no one will allow that bridge to terminate in their high property value area of Montgomery County. Anyway, that's my own commentary. So where were we with this? Yes. This is a lot of people. Remember, it's arrayed along the length 270 of Montgomery County like bulbs on a string of Christmas lights, he says. This is a lot of people. A lot of them work in D.C. or closer to D.C. than where they live. All of them are serviced in their daily commute pretty much entirely by I-270 and the Washington Metro's Red Line train, which runs along 270 for only the innermost fourth of the highway's length. This portion of the Red Line is an absolute circus every single weekday of the year, except for the ones when it's out of service. It's fairly normal for car traffic on the D.C.-bound side of I-270 to pile up around Rockville in the morning just from the sheer number of drivers from farther northwest trying to get into the Shady Grove Metro station so that they can finish their commute on the train instead of having to park their car in D.C. Picture it. Every morning, everybody living in those towns along 270 gets up and gets in their car and hops on 270 toward the city, except while they've been working from home, which has been a joy for them, I'm sure. But that's all over now. Anyway, the ones getting on in Gaithersburg end up behind the ones getting on in Rockville. The ones in Germantown wind up getting on behind the ones getting on in Gaithersburg. The few from Clarksburg get stuck behind the Germantown commuters. The suckers who convinced themselves they could commute to D.C. every day from Frederick end up behind all of those and immediately regret every moment of their lives. Don't even get me started on the not insignificant number of absolute psychos who moved to bleak commuter developments on the edges of freaking Virginia and West Virginia. That's us. Believing they could just zip up Route 15 or Route 340 to Frederick and button hook onto 270 every morning and make it into D.C. I wouldn't go that way. You have to be a little further north and west to even want to try to do that. But zipping up Route 15 is not something that gets done, period. Anyway, nearly all of them, in order to get where they're going in the city itself, must then pour onto the Beltway, the Maryland side of which is an absolute effing zoo, not less than 16 hours a day. This process goes in the other direction in the afternoon and into the evening. This is no small part of why Washington, D.C. pretty routinely ranks among the most traffic-congested cities in the world. You get the idea. 270 is a nightmare. When I was a kid, we lived for a while in Alexandria, Virginia, right near the Beltway, and my mom had a job that required her to commute to Frederick for several months. She had to drive halfway around the Beltway, and then all the way up 270. It was like she had moved out. She was home for so few waking hours of the day, she might as well not have lived with us at all. Her car might as well have been an apartment. And she was going against traffic, driving outward on 270 while everybody in Western Maryland drove inward, and vice versa. We have that issue here. Hagerstown is a further 30 friggin' miles, and he uses the word friggin' here, which I salute. 30 friggin' miles of interstate driving beyond Frederick, beyond the end of 270. It's on the far side of a hellish interchange that turns into a giant snarled parking lot at least as often as it doesn't. Hagerstown might as well be freaking Cleveland. It might as well be on the surface of the moon. It is in the D.C. area like a rat is basically a dog. And these goons, these absolute nimrods, are driving all that distance voluntarily, day after day, one day after another, as he says, just to drive in a effing circle around the Capitol Beltway some number of times and get flipped off by 10,000 different people. Here embedded the tweet we mentioned earlier about a trucker in the convoy says he's taking the day off from driving laps around D.C. because 3 young girls in a blue Hyundai flipped him off. He says he's now fearful. It wasn't, he says, this was interesting. I like this one. It wasn't just a normal middle finger that was relaxed. It messed me up. I found that pretty funny, given the number of middle finger pictures that were taken at Trump rallies. Anyway, this is rather amazing, and I guess there's a bit more to the rant, but only a little bit more. Not that I think I'm going to be able to finish it or anything. I'm going to use up the whole first segment on it. But yes, wow. Well, pretty amazing to get flipped off by 10,000 different people, and then he continues, and then turn around and drive back to Hagerstown again. Because at this action's nearest pass to any kind of legible unifying purpose, they vow to do this every day until the liberals get sufficiently mad at them. And that's only when they don't get lost or confused about what road they're on. A little bit more, and then a little bit more news from other stuff after this. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. The exciting conclusion of Albert Bernanke's, I don't know, I ruined it already. His rant sums it up this way. Let's see. Again, some change in font here. And an embedded tweet that I can't see. I'm going to have to click through to see it, I guess. But no, alas, it's not to be. It won't tell me the rest of this. Unless this is this supposed to be the text of this thing? Anyway, is it possible to make laps around I-270, which, as we have established, I guess somebody in this tweet must have said something about doing laps around I-270. So again, that's the follow-up to them being confused about what road they're on. I wasn't sure what that was about. The tweet is not visible any longer, and I'm not certain why that is, but the question posed about it is it possible to make laps around I-270, which, as we have established, is basically a ramrod straight line segment running from Frederick to Bethesda? Reader, it is not. If you are doing anything on I-270, anything at all, are you on the Beltway? Reader, you are not. If you are driving along I-270 in the early afternoon, during the quietest and least trafficked part of the day, which is what they ended up doing, are you interacting with the city of D.C. at all? Reader, you are not. That's true. There's laughter in the background. None of these things are possible. And of course, the hilarious thing, of course, is that they decided to do their truck rallies in the middle of the day, which was interesting. I don't know whether they were trying to be sympathetic to commuters and not upset them, which would be a good political move. But, then it's like, well, then we might as well not be here. But if it was to disrupt traffic, then, you got to go. What's funny, they didn't want to sit in traffic, these guys. So no one wants to sit in traffic. That's true. But what they would have found out with their protest was, oh, well, I remember the original purpose. Well, we're going to drive 2 or 3 or maybe even 4 wide on the Beltway and drive 15 miles an hour, slow roll, and disrupt all traffic. And people who are familiar with the Beltway know that the problem with rolling trucks at 15 miles an hour on the Beltway during a morning or afternoon commute means you would be smashing into the traffic ahead of you because they're not moving. The essence of it is that they were going to go and block traffic on the Beltway and no one would know the difference because that's the way it is every day. But they would just be annoying people, maybe blowing their horns or something at the same time. It makes no sense. And I can tell you this, I don't know what it is, but I can tell you it won't cure being digitized. That I can promise you. All right. Finally, the big finale here. Forget bothering to come up with a list of specific grievances or any kind of plan for how driving their trucks around aimlessly for a while might persuade or force anyone to address those grievances. These dinguses haven't even bothered to figure out where they are. They congregated from around the country to Hagerstown, Maryland, to voluntarily make North America's worst possible commute twice a day in order to drive a circle around the most miserable road in the world and possibly unintentionally improve its flow of traffic. That's linked. I'd like to see what that's about. To protest being digitized into robots. Well, thank God they got that taken care of. Not only have they somehow convinced themselves that this is a punishment for anybody but themselves, but they're not even effing doing it right. These are professional drivers, man. They literally drive for a living. I have figured out the recent problems with the supply chain. All of the truckers apparently... wow, we're going to have to... How do you even get this word out here? All of the truckers apparently suck at driving places in trucks. I think this is the dumbest the world has ever been. It's quite a wind-up, and you ruin it by censoring it. But, I mean, that's a hell of a... Do other people say that? I'm wondering whether that's like a Northeastern thing, because I've thought about every once in a while when you say that. I remember saying that as a kid. Well, not too young of a kid. A teenager. That something not just sucks, but sucks. Yes, which just sounds so... I don't even know what to say. Censoring it that way is stupid, and I shouldn't bother to do it. But now it's a thing, like worrying about how to pronounce something that I have no chance of ever pronouncing and talking about it for 10 minutes. But, that doesn't make any sense as a phrase, actually. But it was just a way to throw a curse word in there beyond sucks, which didn't really count as a curse word, and even the Hollywood censors gave up on that one right away. Well, that's some good frustration. What do they mean? I'm going to click on this thing and find out about unintentionally improving the flow of traffic. What do we get here? A tweet from Jacob Bacharach, who tweets under the handle of Jake Backpack, and has said what? Grabbed the Washington Post tweet here that says, organizers of the People's Convoy say they are planning to circle their armada of trucks, cars, and SUVs around the Beltway on Sunday morning, and into the work week at the minimum speed limit to slow traffic and get their message to lawmakers. Well, okay, whatever. And Jacob says, it's been a long time since I read up on my queuing theory, but if memory serves, and if this actually occurs, there's every likelihood that uniform multi-lane pace setting will actually improve traffic flow and increase the mean speed throughout the system. Yeah, I get that point. However, not exactly the way it worked out because traffic was already there. They didn't create the traffic. they simply drove into it. Or now they've scheduled their drive for a time when there is no traffic. Okay. Well, that should give you some idea of the protest's efficacy so far. And it's not good. All right. Let's see. Other things to share with you. Gosh, there are so many. Why not read off some of the other things that people have sent in? That seems like a great way to do Fridays. That way I feel like you're all helping me through the show. Even though there's a million things I really want to sneak in. It's funny. I need these. I love to have these contributions because it makes me feel like I'm responsive to you and you pointing out this is the stories that are important to you guys, obviously. So I want to put them in there. But then I'm like, but I also have things. So it's a little bit of a tension there. Anyway, it's Lisa Iannucci has sent me this one. An excellent detailed thread on Maria Butina. Remember her? And the infiltration of U.S. politics from Mom's Demand founder Shannon Watts. I saw this thread the other day, and it was a great reminder of the existence of Maria Butina. You remember the second go-round of Russian red-headed spy ladies, a bad knockoff of the good one, the first one, Anna Chapman, who was from like 2010. And actually got some spying done. Although this one was not so much a spy as just an infiltrator. Probably did more damage than Anna Chapman, though. But at any rate, you remember we traded away Anna Chapman at some point, maybe for Sergei Skripal, if I recall correctly, with like a three-way trade with the Brits. Anyway, Shannon Watts recounts for us the damage that Maria Butina did. And remember, she made the spy rounds here, corrupted the operations in and around the NRA. They were already corrupt, but made it worse. And then got caught, actually served some time for her spying, was released, sent back to Russia, and promptly elected to their parliament, by the way, and is now busy making TikTok videos of how to paint a Z on the lapel of your clothing, which, if you don't have TikTok, what you do is you get some paint and then you paint a effing Z on your clothing, and that's it. I don't need a video for that. I can tell you, what a Z is. Do they not have Z's in the Cyrillic language, or is that what it is? Maybe they don't know what that thing, I got no idea. Anyway, Shannon Watts had some organized thoughts. Lisa meant to share them with you, so here we go. Shannon begins this way. Hey, you know what would be interesting to revisit right now? The decade-long relationship between the NRA, Russia, and Donald Trump. And it is punctuated with the link to the CNN article. Top NRA officials knew Russians were using ties to NRA to establish connection with next U.S. president, report says. This is a piece from 2019, and for some reason they're referring to him as, I guess the next president of the NRA, not the then current president of the United States of America, although they were looking for a better relationship there too. Shannon continues, back in 2010, Alexander Torshin, an upper-ranking member of Putin's party, became involved with a U.S.-Russia exchange program, that in quotes, that the FBI believes was, quote, an elaborate cover for a Washington-based Russian spy recruiting effort. That, too, linked to evidence, this time an article from Politico. Around that time, Torshin is connected to a Nashville lawyer who has an office in Russia, who in turn connects Torshin to then NRA President David Keene. And I guess this is a picture of the two of them in this tweet. Next one up, in 2011, Torshin is introduced to a young Russian woman named Maria Butina. Did we ever decide on how she pronounces that? Maybe we don't want to give her the honor. Anyway, ultimately, he hires her as a special assistant. Simultaneously, Butina becomes the founding chair of Russia's new gun group, the Right to Bear Arms. Also in 2011, then NRA President David Keene appointed John Bolton to lead the NRA's Subcommittee on International Affairs. Hold that thought, she says. In 2012, Torshin attended the NRA annual meeting as a VIP guest of the NRA president. That year, Torshin also traveled to the NRA's D.C. headquarters and to the home of Sergei Kislyak, Russia's ambassador to the U.S., whose future contacts with Trump's campaign will raise red flags. In 2013, then NRA President David Keene and Alan Gottlieb, leader of the Second Amendment Foundation, attend the Right to Bear Arms' first, quote, convention in Moscow. Gottlieb is pictured here on that trip with Torshin and Butina. And Marina appears to be the tallest one of the whole group, which is kind of interesting. I don't think she's giant either. Anyway, back to Bolton. In 2013, Bolton and Butina collaborate. A video appears online of Bolton delivering an address to Right to Bear Arms, supporting the group's pursuit of a gun rights amendment to the Russian Constitution. How interesting. And here, the evidence, an NPR.org piece on Bolton's curious appearance in a Russian gun rights video. In 2014, U.S.-Russia relations are tense after Russia's invasion of Crimea. Torshin said he steered the legislation that annexed the territory and appeared with Putin at a signing ceremony. Butina denounced U.S. sanctions and advised a militia group helping Putin seize Crimea. But the NRA is still Russia's BFF. Butina attends the NRA's 2014 annual meeting in Indianapolis, meeting with the highest-ranking officers of the NRA, including CEO Wayne LaPierre. She also travels to NRA headquarters that year, meeting in person with Keene. In 2015, Butina attends the NRA's annual meeting again, this time in Nashville, where Trump is the keynote speaker. Is this him speaking? Yes, so we get to say it in his voice. We need strength. We need people that are respected. Putin has no respect for our president, Trump said in his speech, and he still didn't, even after Trump won, by the way. Torshin claims he met Trump in Nashville, and that Trump said to him, "So you're from Russia. What are you going to invade? When are you going to invade Latvia?" Okay. Why not? And also windmills. Just to throw that in there. We didn't play that clip, did we? The Trump White House denies this encounter took place, but the evidence provided here in the link from Rolling Stone, the article, Inside the Decade-Long Russian Campaign to Infiltrate the NRA and Help Elect Trump by Tim Dickinson. Okay. Continuing on with Shannon's thread. At the end of 2015, Torshin and Butina invite NRA leaders to a Right to Bear Arms convention in Moscow. Attendees include Keene, Pete Brownell, CEO of one of America's largest gun sellers and eventual NRA president, as well as Trump surrogate and then Milwaukee Sheriff David Clark. You remember him? He's one of the few who are taller than Marina Butina here. Okay. At this point, Butina, now a Russian celebrity appearing in magazines, is still on the Russia government's payroll as special assistant to Torshin, and Torshin has been appointed deputy governor of the Russian Central Bank. And here a photo from one of the magazines of her appearing in like a long leather coat and essentially no pants, I don't know, and stockings and high heels and guns, of course, but, a high fashion gun posing shoot, whatever. Okay. Next up in the thread here, it's 2016 now, and Butina enters the U.S. on a student visa. Student, really. She attends the NRA's annual meeting in Kentucky and hangs out with NRA President Brownells, who has been implicated as a go-between in the corrupt relationship between the gun lobby and Russia. Evidence here, the Washington Post piece, Pete Brownell, who heads major supplier of firearms accessories, resigns from the NRA board. The piece by Tom Hamburger on May 30th, 2019. Shannon continues. The NRA officially endorses Trump at that Kentucky meeting, marking the gun lobby's earliest ever presidential endorsement. Trump vowed in his speech, "I will never let you down." never going to give you up, the whole thing. That same year, the NRA publicly gives Trump $30 million for his campaign. However, sources suggest the true total was actually far greater, $70 million or more, through untraceable dollars, possibly from Russia. Terrific. Okay, that link here to one of our own pieces, I guess, at everytown.org, Everytown statement on a reported FBI investigation into this situation. Next up, 2017, Butina tries to score a Russian jet fuel deal with the help of Keane, now the former NRA president, and his wife, Donna, a Washington lobbyist. The botched deal puts Butina on the FBI's radar. New York Times covering that one and linked as evidence. In 2018, the same year, Bolton becomes national security advisor because the notorious spy Mike Flynn has been fired and everybody else in between him. Anyway, so now Bolton has become security advisor, national security advisor. 2018, Butina is arrested and pleads guilty to being directed by the Russian government to, quote, establish unofficial lines of communication with Americans having power and influence over politics. According to the evidence attached here, a Justice Department release, Trump-era Justice Department, no less. House Democrats asked for documents showing whether Bolton disclosed his prior connections to Butina, citing concerns that Trump's first national security advisor, Michael Flynn, was not forthcoming about his communications with Russian officials. So this is at his confirmation hearing, I guess. We need to know about what your ties to Butina are. I don't know whether he ever gave any of that evidence up. In 2019, a Senate report revealed that the NRA had acted as a foreign asset for Russia in the period leading up to the 2016 election. Oh my. Evidence presented in the NRA's bankruptcy trial in 2020 included a monthly bill from NRA attorney Bill Brewer for the month of December 2020 that includes legal bills of over $59,000 for, quote, Russia. That's the itemization he puts on his billing. How interesting. Butina, 33, who returned to Russia in October of 2019 after spending 15 months in several U.S. penitentiaries, including 4 months in solitary confinement, now represents Russia's impoverished Kirov region in the Duma. New York Times article attesting to that fact is attached. Last week, Butina, whose unfettered access to Trump and NRA officials was based on her commitment to unfettered access to guns, said Ukraine should not hand out weapons to its citizens, as they were doing, in case a child gets hurt. That's the part that caught my eye when I saw her thread the other day. How about that? And that's, I guess, her first ending for the thread, but she picks up the thread a little bit later. But how about that? You know that the reason, of course, she didn't want guns being handed out in Ukraine is so that people couldn't resist the Russian invasion. But what an excuse. And a great example of the Russians being able to, translate and understand divisive political fights here in the United States and just exploit them. I mean, you're able to see that a significant portion of the country thinks that unfettered access to guns is a danger to children, which it is. And all of a sudden, now, super NRA fan Maria Butina is like, oh, yeah, you can't have guns all over the place because kids could get hurt, but only in Ukraine. Here in Russia, I don't know what. They build the kids out of titanium? I'm not sure. Anyway, she picks up the thread again. Oh, and here's the video of Marina painting the Z on her clothing. She picks this up 2 days later. Maria Butina making a video encouraging people to draw a white Z on their lapel to show solidarity with the invasion of Ukraine. And by the way, it is barely visible. You really have to get up close to take a look. And then some more additions here. Breaking news from March 8th. Elena Branson coordinated with Putin to promote Russian propaganda in the U.S., illegally acting as a Russian foreign agent while operating U.S.-based organizations, the DOJ says. And here she is. I don't know who Elena Branson is. Here she is with fellow Russian agent and NRA ally Maria Butina. But who is this person? I actually don't know who we're talking about here. There's a Reuters article attached to it. Should we go and see? Dual national charged with acting as unregistered Russian agent in the U.S., according to prosecutors. This just a couple of days ago. A dual national of the United States and Russia who ran an I Love Russia influence campaign has been charged with illegally acting as an unregistered agent to the Russian government. Elena Branson, 61, faces 6 criminal counts over allegations by prosecutors that she failed to register with the U.S. government. Okay, I get the idea. What does she do? Let's see. Prosecutors said Branson received tens of thousands of dollars in funding from the Russian government to run an organization named the Russian Center New York, which organized the I Love Russia campaign in the United States and promoted Russian history and culture to U.S. youth. The organization also lobbied officials in the state of Hawaii not to change the name of a formerly Russian fort on the Isle of Kauai. And organized a trip for Hawaiian officials to Moscow, they love going there, to meet with Russian counterparts, prosecutors said. I mean, a free trip to Moscow. Moscow's a place on earth that not a lot of people get to, and if you get to go there for free, I'm sure it's a thrill and everything. But, I mean, if I'm, like, sitting in Hawaii and they're like, you want to go to Moscow? No. For free? Nah. Still a no. I mean, all right, maybe. I mean, you get to go back to Hawaii, so why not? Although now I wouldn't take that trip, right? Because now, of course, they might hold you hostage the way they are with the basketball player whose story we have neglected to mention on the air because I don't know anything about it other than the fact that she's a big women's basketball star playing in the Russian league during the off-season from the WNBA because the WNBA doesn't pay their players nearly as much as NBA players get, so she basically plays a second season, works a second job, probably getting paid real good and all. But, now stuck in Russia as she tries to leave because they, allegedly find drugs in her luggage. And so now I don't know whether we're supposed to, call off swapping jets with Poland in order to get her back. No demands made so far. Maybe we'll get back around to that story. I should mention it anyway. And but I don't know enough about women's basketball or men's basketball, for that matter, to tell you who it is. It's you could blame it on not knowing anything about the WNBA because sexist America, but this is just sexist me. I don't know, but I don't know any regular men's basketball was regular basketball. All right, well, let's screw that up. Angry letters to Armando, please. He will handle them. Okay. Well, anyway, such activity is not by itself illegal, apparently, giving people free trips to Moscow, I guess, or asking them not to change the name of a fort. Wow. But U.S. lobbyists for foreign governments are required to disclose their affiliation to the U.S. Department of Justice. Okay, so she wasn't up to anything awful, but okay, don't rename a fort on Kauai. And what was a Russian fort doing there anyway? Was there some point at which Russia was the owner of the Hawaiian Islands as well? Alaska and Hawaii. Boy. Well, I don't think I knew that. But again, I don't know anything about basketball. Don't know anything about Hawaii, except it's nice and it's a bunch of islands. That's kind of it. But what more do you really need to know? They don't want me to come and visit there anyway because they're afraid it'll bring them more coronavirus. Okay. Next in the thread here, I guess there's one more. It's a new bit from the 9th, 2 days ago. The Russian agent who infiltrated the NRA is pushing Putin's propaganda again, claiming Ukraine is bombing itself, which they have the right to do, by the way. Anyway, we have tons of evidence that the Russia army does not bomb civilian populations, Maria Butina said. Tons of evidence. Wow. Well, so she's carrying water for the Russians, but at least she's doing it there in Russia, and we don't have to deal with her anymore. But just a reminder that there's probably a gold mine there as well. But honestly, they're digging up all of the nuggets themselves and making them available. You may have seen the other day, I don't know if I even put it aside, but I guess in recent days, before he got the memo, which he wouldn't be able to read anyway, probably, Madison Cawthorn was out trashing Zelensky. I don't know where, but somewhere. Captured on video is him saying Zelensky's a thug and he's the one who's corrupt and he's causing this whole problem, and the right side of history is Putin, essentially. I'll see if we can dig that thing up, but you've probably seen it by now. And now I think he was just hoping that video either wasn't recorded or nobody had it, or he just totally forgot what he spouted that day. And I think he was trying to get on side with the Ukraine thing like the rest of the Republicans are doing, but, the video caught up with him. Anywho, so too bad for him. Let's see. Other things to get into here. There's plenty, although once again running up against the time thing. I can at least bring this tweet from the other day to your attention. It's our friend Travis, who still tweets as Irreverent Duo and occasionally chimes in on the topics here. Just making this random point, which I thought was well worth doing. Wouldn't it be nice? In fact, he says it would be nice if Ilyana Ros-Lehtinen, former longtime influential U.S. House of Representatives member from Florida, Republican, Cuban-American, of course, and mother to a trans child, which I didn't know, would speak out more about the Don't Say Gay bill. We haven't really discussed that very much, what's going on down in Florida, but I think you're all pretty well aware of what's going on there. But by the way, it makes for a good opportunity to transition, if it wasn't the fact that we were running out of time in the segment, to the outrageous bills being proposed once again in the Republican-controlled state legislatures around the country, most of which I hope will never actually see the light of day as law. But I have seen some incredible things shared in the last couple of days, which just continue the Republican gimmitarian trend of let's outlaw everything we don't like, regardless of how outrageously unconstitutional it would be to do so. We'll round up some of those things if I can dig them up during the 1 minute break we're taking right now. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Okay, yes, here are the comments. How long does this thing run? Not that long, so maybe I can bring that up and what do we have to do? Pocket it and then call up Pocket on the big screen, which is fine because I was doing that before when I was playing the convoy thing. Only about 10 seconds of audio here, so got an offset carrier. I think it's audio. Let's run it. Oh, we got to turn up the sound on this thing first. Okay, that means I got to pause it because 10 seconds of run. All right, here we go. I think.
Remember that Zelensky is a thug. Remember that the Ukrainian government is incredibly corrupt and it is incredibly evil and it has been pushing woke ideologies and it really there's the new woke world.
Okay, so awfully dumb comments to begin with. And also, by the way, only recorded in mono. So it was like in my left ear and nowhere else. So that was kind of annoying. But Zelensky is a thug, in case you couldn't make out his garbled speaker in the bad recording. Remember that the Ukrainian government is incredibly corrupt and is incredibly evil. Now, that part of it, and then, he goes on to say, and has been pushing woke ideologies, which it hasn't, and also really would. I mean, somebody was pointing out, I think woke is just the new thing. They got a memo that says stop saying socialist and say woke instead, because that sort of works like with the kids. We'll be hip or something. I don't know. Anyway, it's not pushing any woke ideologies, but the notion that it's incredibly corrupt and is incredibly evil, like I'm sure there's corruption in the Ukrainian government. I'm sure there's corruption everywhere. And whatever. They've got their share, maybe more than their share. But the idea that it's the Ukrainian government that's so incredibly corrupt and incredibly evil, so look away from the Russian government being incredibly corrupt and incredibly evil, goes back to one of the big Trump lies, which goes back to his first impeachment. And and the second. I mean, because they're both the same, essentially, as Greg has been pointing out. But it goes back to the first impeachment where Trump was saying, oh, no. It's the Ukrainians who are corrupt here. Even though I'm the one being impeached for the corruption, I was only being corrupt to them because they're so corrupt. And they're so corrupt, that's how I know that they've been dealing with Joe Biden and trying to corrupt him as well. Oh, Scott says there was silence when we were playing the Hawthorne clip. So maybe the fact that it came out as mono is an indication that the connection was wrong somehow. But anyway, it doesn't matter. You hear him in his stupid voice saying exactly what I told you. Zelensky is a thug. Remember that the Ukrainian government is incredibly corrupt and is incredibly evil, has been pushing woke ideologies. Remember also that Trump was pushing the idea of that, as if he knew that the investigators would eventually find that there really was clearly infiltration and interference with significant and material interference with the U.S. election. He basically said, well, see, the truth is that it was the Ukrainians doing that stuff, not the Russians. And you people can't tell the difference between Ukrainians and Russians, and we probably couldn't. But the idea was to put the blame on them and to sell the message to fellow Republicans, at least, that the Ukrainian government is, well, incredibly corrupt and incredibly evil. And then, of course, just to make things, more obvious for Republicans as to who's the bad guy here. They've been pushing woke ideologies. Like what? Like what? Nothing. He has nothing to say. Anyway, interesting note on that, by the way. I did see circulated shortly thereafter the note that the discovery of this video, Andrew Kaczynski notes that the Madison Cawthorn comments were first reported by Karl Rove, of all people, in a Wall Street Journal opinion piece, which is super weird, as he says, and sat unnoticed in his Wall Street Journal op-ed until today. Here's the quoting of it. But from a Karl Rove piece in the Wall Street Journal, these numbers suggest that Republican members of Congress, candidates and commentators echoing Mr. Trump's isolationism and Kremlin apologetics are out of sync with GOP voters. We discussed that yesterday, right? Madison Cawthorn didn't reflect Republican opinion when he called Mr. Zelensky a thug and Ukraine's government incredibly evil last Saturday at a town hall in Asheville, North Carolina. So it's only a week since then. Ohio Senate candidate J.D. Vance was way out of touch with GOP voters when he declared in an interview, I got to be honest with you, I don't really care what happens to Ukraine one way or another. He later backtracked, perhaps having realized he'd offended Ohio's large Ukrainian American community, as well as plenty of Reaganite Republicans. The sheer aggression and promiscuous brutality of Mr. Putin, combined with the awe-inspiring courage of Mr. Zelensky, the Ukrainian military and the Ukrainian people have provided the U.S. a clarifying moment. Come home, America turns out to be as unwise a foreign policy doctrine in 2022 as it was when Democrat George McGovern, he has to get a ding in here, coined the phrase in 1972. And nobody's still saying that phrase, by the way. It's much clearer now than a month ago that when the U.S. withdraws from the world suffers, and so does America. Well, that was certainly Karl Rove by the end there. But, interesting. Okay. And, worth noting. So let me mark that one for later inclusion. All right, and let's see. Other news. Oh, as I'm scrolling through the thread here, the Twitter threads, I note for the record the passing of Emilio Delgado. This is a loss for people of a certain age, and the age range is rather wide. Maybe best known to you as Luis from Sesame Street from way back when. Passing away recently, and that in the news. And sad bit of news for everybody. Charles Entenmann and Emilio Delgado in the same week. It's been tough. Cookie Monster in particular, a double blow for him. Well, at any rate, let's see other things. That are here in the Twitter thread. We might as well run through a couple of these as well too. Did we end up getting a story on this one? Did he link to it? Yes, okay. Yesterday, a tweet from Reese Oxner from the Texas Tribune with the breaking news and then promising a later story, and it's here now. Employees of a Texas contracted facility meant to care for children who are victims of sex trafficking was discovered, yes, finish the sentence, sex trafficking the same children, aged 11 to 17, according to a federal judge. And, of course, I'm sure that none of the QAnon people found out about it and broke up the child sex trafficking ring. For some reason, they are always asleep at the wheel whenever actual child sex trafficking turns up. But they're constantly on the lookout for it. They just never find it. Who finds it? Well, we'll find out whether it was federal, state, or local authorities. If we take a quick look at the Texas Tribune piece, kids in foster care who'd been victims of sex trafficking endured fresh abuse at a state shelter, the report says. And I don't know. I don't think I want to read all the way through this one because it can be upsetting and I guess triggering for some. But I want to just note the fact that it happened and the story is out there. This is happening at the place called The Refuge, which is poorly named then. A facility located in Bastrop, is that the pronunciation? Contracted by the Texas Department of Family and Protective Services, according to a report from a current employee. And so I guess we can say Greg Abbott and the rest also asleep at the switch here. And yes, amazingly, no QAnon intervention whatsoever, except for the possibility that maybe I'd bet a small sum that some Q-interested people were perhaps among the perpetrators or among the foster parents involved in this. Just strikes me as a distinct possibility. You know, we'll find out. Anyway, I'll mark the story for you and share it with you. You can read it on your own if it's to your taste, if you can stand it. But I just thought I would make note of that since I was thumbing back through my Twitter threads here. Because sometimes a lot of the interesting tidbits of news don't make it to pocket from there. Things I don't necessarily intend to spend a great deal of time on, but that do come up from time to time and then worth sharing on a Friday. Something to talk about over the weekend or to look into. I mentioned that there were a number of crazy proposed laws in the various state legislatures when I was telling you about the tweet from Travis about Ileana Ross-Lehtinen being, I didn't know this, the mother of a trans child. There is, where was this happening? I'm going to have to go back and see whether, I'm pretty sure I would have pocketed this stuff because it was a weird trend, but hey, maybe not. I don't know. All right, let me go back to my Twitter feed and look for it too. But one in Missouri of late definitely captured my attention yesterday. In Missouri, yet another off the rails anti-abortion legislation, piece of legislation proposed. And this one leads me to think that it's possible that the author, in, I'm guessing, his zeal to be comprehensively anti-abortion, may not, certainly doesn't understand the medicine that he's dealing with, but may not even just understand the terminology that he's dealing with. And this is a piece, it's in here somewhere. There we are. Okay. The original tweet here, which I have a tweet that is also commented on by Lindsay Bearstein, who picked it up and passed it on into my timeline here. But Sarah Unsicker, a Missouri state representative herself, has taken note of this one. Extremists, she says, are working to harm women again in Missouri today. This bill will be heard in committee today, and she links to it. And the bill is HB 2810, and indeed written by a man, Brian Seitz, Seitz, who sends a bill modifying provisions relating to abortion, including the importation and distribution of drugs used to perform or induce abortions. That, I guess, the original intent of what they were trying to do, to ban the drugs used, not only, I guess, probably for like the abortion, the morning after pill type drugs, but any other drugs used in the performance of any sort of abortion. You know, they're trying to outlaw things across the board. But in what I think is an effort to be even more extreme, like, okay, the typical anti-abortion legislation will restrict abortions after a certain number of weeks, and they keep chipping away at the number of weeks to try to push it back further and further without falling afoul of Roe v. Wade. But eventually, you know, the hope for them is that the Supreme Court will just throw out Roe v. Wade and they'll be able to ban abortion outright. But there's also usually exceptions granted for the usual reasons, as they say, rape, incest, and life of the mother, right? Those are the generally accepted, or were the generally accepted exceptions, and they've been chipping away at that as well. And of course, the hardliners saying, well, why should pregnancies that are a result of rape or incest be exempted? Those children have as much, they're blameless in this. Those quote unquote children, pre-born children, have just as much right to life, as they like to say, as anybody else. Yeah, well, problematic, of course, when you're dealing with the current life that exists right here on Earth, and what they have to go through in order to, service somebody else's conscience about what they think about when life begins or who's entitled to what. But okay, without getting too far into that argument, there are also, of course, there's also the life of the mother exception. If the pregnancy endangers the life of the mother, and you might wonder, if you don't know anything about anything, what sorts of situations would those be? Well, the one that's certainly clearest and easiest to explain is the ectopic pregnancy. That is the one in which, I guess, the fertilized zygote has not made its way all the way down into the uterus and is trapped in the fallopian tubes and embeds there, where, there's not enough room for a fetus to grow, and it will instead rupture and cause internal bleeding and likely kill everyone involved, mother and child. And the child at this point is, it can't happen but with a zygote that is literally a clump of cells at that point and nothing else. There's not even any, how the anti-abortion people like to say, well, you can see the shape of a child coming into formation at X number of weeks. Well, no such things here. If it were the case that that child was that far along, mom's already dead because the fallopian tube's not big enough to accommodate anything that looks even remotely like a child. So very, very early. Also very, very dangerous. And not all that uncommon either. Okay, I think we know this. Well, anyway, ordinarily, that's the sort of thing that you say, well, okay, if you discover that there's an ectopic pregnancy, then we have to say, all right, fine, because there's no chance for the child to live. There's no child yet. The cells haven't made their way to the uterus and won't. And it will kill the mother, or at least very nearly kill her if there's a rupture, and cause a very serious medical problem that can turn deadly very quickly. So, okay, we'll allow for that. Even though I'm sure hardliners said, well, God wants this to happen. Well, medicine doesn't, all right? Well, at any rate, I think what might have happened here is Brian might not know what that is and has never looked into it. He just knows it's an exception to the anti-abortion laws that they have so far successfully passed there. And he wants to be a hardliner. And he's one of those people who said, no, rape and incest, I'm guessing. Rape and incest, sorry, you're going to have to bear those children. They're blameless. And the only thing that's left is the life of the mother. Well, when does that happen? Well, it's called, for instance, it happens with an ectopic pregnancy. All right, well, those are banned too, but not just banned. Sarah points out in her screen grab of the text of the bill, it says, this bill establishes the offense of trafficking abortion. I got to read this because the font is a little screwy, so it's a little hard to read. It establishes the offense of trafficking abortion-inducing devices or drugs if a person or entity knowingly imports, exports, distributes, delivers, manufactures, produces, prescribes, device, medicine, drug, or other means or substance to be used to administer, although it says to administers, they got a lot of work to do in editing this, or dispenses or attempts to do so. You get the idea, they're trying to cover every base. Any instrument, perform or induce an abortion on another person in violation of state or federal law, which, of course, they're going to make every single one of them against state law. But basically, any import, export, manufacture, trafficking, whatever the drugs that are used in the procedure or any device that's used in the procedure, they're not going to outlaw abortion. They're going to outlaw the things you use to perform an abortion, right? If Roe v. Wade protects the right to abortion, we're just going to outlaw the use of operating rooms for abortions or the use of sterile equipment for abortions. Well, at any rate, when you do that, it will be a Class B felony. Now, it goes on to say it is a Class A felony. That is, there's an enhancement here when one of the following things happen. And there are only 3 of them visible here, but there is a 4th and maybe more after that. If any of these things happen, it's a higher penalty, a Class A felony. If 1, the abortion was performed, induced, or attempted on a woman carrying an unborn child of more than 10 weeks gestational age. They're going to get down to 10 weeks. So now it's a Class A if you abort at 10 weeks and 1 day. And a lot of people, as we already know, don't even necessarily know that they're pregnant at that point, but okay. We've been over this ground and we know what they're trying to do here. Check out number 2 here. It goes from Class B felony to Class A felony if the abortion was performed or induced or attempted on a woman who has an ectopic pregnancy. Wow. So what they're saying here is you discover that you have one of those pregnancies that threatens the life of the mother. If you perform that abortion, which used to be an exception, used to be allowed, not only is it now against the law, but it's a higher offense, a sentencing enhancement if you abort an ectopic pregnancy. How could that possibly make any sense? I think it's that the bill author doesn't know what he's talking about, what that is physically, and doesn't understand the medicine of it, doesn't understand the terminology of it. He just knows that that's one of those exceptions that we have, and I'm so hardline, I'm going to get rid of it. Third, and this one's a little weird. I mean, I think this one goes to the rape and incest thing, but at a different angle. And one that, this too, I think will not resonate even with Republicans and anti-abortion people. Class A felony if the abortion was performed and induced or attempted on a woman who is the victim of sex trafficking. So where there used to be exceptions for rape, okay, incest, yes. Life of the mother now taken care of by banning and actually adding a sentencing enhancement for ectopic pregnancies. But on top of that, one more set of pregnancies for which you might be able to generate a certain amount of sympathy in terminating it, those who have been subjected to sex trafficking. But now you go from Class B felony to Class A felony by performing an abortion on somebody who's been sex trafficked, or trafficked for sex, probably a better way of saying it, which also is extraordinarily cruel and not at all, I don't think, in step even with anti-abortion Republican sentiment. But again, he's going to be the tough guy. I brook none of this stuff. That's pretty amazing. So then Sarah, tweets again, let me restate, it increases the penalty if it ends an ectopic pregnancy or the pregnancy for a person who has been sex trafficked. That is rather astounding, to say the least. So, okay, that is surprising and unrealistic, to say the very least. But there you have it. There's no getting past it. Okay. There's another bill out there that is also fairly crazy. Oh, this isn't the one that I was thinking of here, but I'll open it up. But was it Idaho? I mean, I don't mean to insult anybody by accidentally mistaking them for being the home of the crazy legislature that is trying this, but I guess inspired by, there's a whole new set of laws inspired by the so far the success of the Texas vigilante statute, where if you turn in a woman or someone helping a woman get an abortion, out of state in Texas, whether in state or leaving the state, you can collect the $10,000 bounty, right? Well, now every state is going to try this, but they're also doing more to empower citizens to start their own prosecution, whether it's to seek a bounty or otherwise. They are after the idea of everybody turning everybody else in for doing stuff that they don't like. So one of them it may be in Idaho, where they are trying desperately to clamp down on that other thing they don't like, transgenderism, and transgender people and people who support people who are transgender. Here it is. Okay. So, or at least one iteration of it is here. In Idaho, a bill would now make it a felony to provide trans-affirming care to youth. And here we get into the difficult and fraught area of dealing with, I guess that they're really worried about is particularly young kids who they and their parents, discover early on that they are or may be transgender. And it's a very controversial thing because a lot of people have difficulty understanding, as I do, how in some cases such young kids could come to this conclusion. But then again, the thing that makes it difficult for me to figure out what to do here is very frequently hear from people who say, well, when it comes to, say, sexual orientation, lots of people don't know until later. But lots of people also say, I always just knew. I didn't maybe know what I was talking about or what it was that I was thinking about. I just knew that something was different. And it took me a while to figure out what it was. So I guess it's entirely possible that even at a young age, you could have this notion. And then you have the situation of, all right, so supposing a kid has this notion that I feel that I'm in the wrong kind of body here. And they're open with their parents about it. And parents may be saying to themselves, I don't want the psychological damage of my child feeling trapped this whole time. I understand that it's possible for them to make a transition in gender, or I don't even know if we even will say that as gender anymore. It's also very fraught, the language, but you get the idea. And you want, so for parents who want to be supportive of the possibility, they begin to then think, well, if your child is young enough, they begin to think, prepubescent, well, ought we not to intervene here and avoid the trauma of puberty transitioning your biological body into, well, I guess it's biologically designated gender, if you feel like that's the wrong one. And there is an opportunity, I guess, at that point to intervene. But again, that feels to me like this is where it becomes so fraught. Don't know. it depends on, I guess, every individual situation, whether or not you think that's going to be a good idea or a bad idea. But in Idaho, they think it's all a bad idea, and they want to label it all child abuse, to accept and acknowledge that your child has this, I don't know. I don't even know how to quantify it, but at this point, a general inkling of some kind that something is wrong here and we want to do something about it at this early stage. Acknowledging and supporting that will become felony child abuse in Idaho. But on top of all of that, it also says that if you then say, well, then this place is not for me, we have to move, I will support my child by up and moving from Idaho and doing it elsewhere. Somehow they try to make that a felony too. How you can make a felony out of activity in another state, I do not know. Hi everybody, it's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Or read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. My goodness. Oh, okay. The microphone backwards on that one, but nothing happening here to reveal. Anyway, yeah, so the Idaho bill and another Missouri bill, I think another Missouri bill, but also on abortion, just seems, again, like the most outrageous, I don't know what, just authoritarianism. And, of course, the idea of sort of a gimme-tarian approach to everything. Outlaw everything we don't like for freedom. The Idaho bill also described, let's see, as HB 675, which it says passed the House, I guess, by a vote of 55 to 13, although that vote total makes it sound like it might have been in a Senate, but maybe the Idaho House is also very small. Idaho Senate, I think, is even smaller than that, right? So 55 to 13, the description here says it would make providing gender-affirming care to trans teens a felony with a life sentence. I don't think I got to that part before. Up to, or at least up to, life is possible. I suppose you could get a lot less. Worse, it makes leaving the state with your trans teen to move elsewhere and provide them with care a felony as well. So that's very difficult to get past and understand where they think they're coming from. But yeah, all of these things, I guess they're listed here with some specificity what is prohibited. But it's really rather remarkable. And then, of course, the Missouri bill, and I don't know if it's the same one as the one also outlawing ectopic pregnancy termination, but that bill also purports to prohibit women from leaving the state to get an abortion. Not only is abortion then illegal in Missouri, but if you go elsewhere to get it, that's illegal too, and highly questionable whether or not that's constitutional. But, you know, these days with this Supreme Court, flip a coin, tell me whether you think you'll get 5 robes to say, yeah, that's fundamentally unconstitutional, but we're letting it go anyway, and there's no appeal from us, so go for it. Yeah, that's a serious problem. By the way, I did see somebody tweeting something interesting earlier today. I wonder if I would be able to dig this one up. There were some, issues with the terminology, I guess. But I thought it was a good point to bring up a nurse who was tweeting. Now, I guess this Idaho bill is pretty specific in that it's talking about puberty-blocking drugs and various other things that are specific to transgender care. But the way they put it here in the tweet, where they were saying it prohibits providing gender-affirming care to trans teens. This nurse was saying, that's like a hot button issue and a phrase that's intended to like strike fear in the heart of conservatives, gender-affirming care. Like, oh, well, that's something only that trans people do. But this nurse was pointing out, by the way, I've been a nurse and I've helped hundreds of women recover after breast implant surgery. I've even helped people, as she said, recover after penile implant surgery, right? And, I mean, that's gender-affirming care, isn't it? And I thought, that's actually quite right. Now, she went on to make further assumptions about their sexual orientations, which means that it speaks, it's trying to make those things mean too much. But that's an interesting thing. Like, I would find me the red-blooded American Republican male who thinks gender-affirming care should be outlawed because he thinks it has only to do with trans people, trans kids perhaps in particular, but in general, I think we're going to ban gender-affirming care and remind him, hey, breast implants, that's gender-affirming care. Now, it's gender-affirming care for women who aren't transitioning, perhaps. Although, like I said, the nurse was saying, well, they're not only gender-affirming care for straight people, but we don't know that. And that was what the problem was with the terminology. Similarly, the penile implant, we don't know the sexual orientation of the person getting that. It's just, we know the gender, yes. That's it. So just stop there, I think. Or we may think we know the gender. These days, we can't tell for sure. Who knows? But at any rate, the point is that there's lots of gender-affirming care. And gender-affirming care, I think, could be, that's a pretty wide umbrella. Like, is Viagra and Cialis not gender-affirming care? I mean, there are people for whom it would be pointless to take that, right? And the people for whom it would be presumably useful are, even today, potentially of the gender that you would be thinking of when you think about the ordinary application of these drugs. Trying to be careful. But anyway, but then that's gender-affirming care, isn't it? But somehow that gets hung on only the trans stuff, which we hate because it's somehow lousy. I don't know. But Republicans should be reminded, breast implants are gender-affirming care. Oh, God, we can't outlaw those. That they'll snap to attention. Don't stop that, for God's sake. All right, many other things to get to. I don't even know how we're going to do it, but let's run down the list of what was already in pocket to see if we can share some of those other things. Let's see, what other amazing things to include. Oh, you know what? I found a probably fairly serious and straightforward discussion of what is driving the QAnon type nuts to think that there were biowarfare labs in Ukraine. That's written up in Foreign Policy, in case you would like to have a scholarly view of what is the kernel of truth, if any, that led to this conspiracy theory emerging. That answer is there. I don't know. We'll see if I return to that. I don't think so. There's many other things to take a quick look at. Let's see. Here's a worrisome write-up. Something we discussed briefly the other day, and we have discussed from time to time. This in boltsmagazine.org. I don't even know what I'm looking at, but I know what the article is about. Supreme Court signals it may empower legislatures to subvert elections. All of the dumb Kraken theories about what it means to determine the manner of selecting either members of the Electoral College or, for that matter, conducting any election. All up in the air now. And I guess also slightly perhaps related to the Madison Cawthorn case. My brother Mark had brought that up too. He asked me in email what did I think about the weird theory about the Amnesty Act. You know, we've addressed that in the last couple of, days or weeks as well. That, too, an upside-down and backwards interpretation of the law that ends up giving every member of Congress from 18 whatever it was on free shots at insurrection. You can conduct an insurrection or participate in an insurrection, and you can't be prosecuted for it, according to that theory. And recall that, so as it now stands, a federal judge says, no, the North Carolina Board of Elections can't currently, under this theory, block Madison Cawthorn from the ballot. But I don't believe that case is over yet. That should be pretty reversible, but I don't know that they'll reverse and also grant the Board of Elections the power to block him from the ballot, but they might overturn the district court judge's interpretation of the Amnesty Act. Anyway, over here in Bolts, Supreme Court signals it may empower legislatures to subvert elections. Republicans are pushing the independent state legislature doctrine, which would bolster unfettered gerrymandering and Trump's efforts to undercut democracy. This is by Christian Farias, Farias, who writes here, basically, this is like the Heller versus D.C. of elections law, inventing a new theory that nobody ever believed in, and early on was dismissed as ludicrous, and then poof, we're all wrong because the higher courts are willing, as Republican activists, to say, yes, we should make this the law. The U.S. Supreme Court signaled on Monday that at least 4 justices are ready and willing to bless a legal theory that was never really taken seriously until the 2020 elections. The so-called independent state legislature doctrine, if adopted, would provide new legal cover for Republicans to use their vast powers in states to subvert elections, shield aggressive gerrymanders, and restrict access to the vote in Democratic strongholds at the local level. Their feverish idea is that state legislatures should have complete and unfettered control over how federal elections are run and regulated, shielded even from the oversight of state courts. Against the backdrop of efforts by President Donald Trump's supporters to reverse the last presidential election and prepare for the next one, the doctrine would give carte blanche, that's French, carte blanche, to Republican-run legislatures in swing states like Georgia and Wisconsin, which the GOP has gerrymandered to ensure it never loses. How so? In 2020, Texas and other Republican-led states implored the Supreme Court to block certification of the presidential election results in key states like Pennsylvania, the Joe Biden one. They claimed that those states had flouted the Constitution and passed legal precedents, purportedly making it clear that, quote, a single branch of state government, that is, the state legislature, has the authority to set the rules governing the appointment of presidential electors. Because executive and judicial officials made significant changes to the legislatively defined election laws in the defendant states, Texas insisted, these states had violated the Constitution's Electors Clause and Elections Clause. You remember the basis of this was the constitutional provision that says that the state legislatures, or the legislatures thereof, and that meaning the states, shall determine the manner of electing the members of the Electoral College, and that it was their view that the manner meant every single thing about how the election was conducted. Up to now, the practice has been, well, what you're doing is either choosing to hold a popular election to select the members of the Electoral College or opting for something else. Appointment by the state legislature was the previous method, or whatever you want to come up with, flipping a coin, drawing lots, however you want to do it. Hunger Games, for instance, just a suggestion. Maybe you want to think about that. And that once you've chosen that it be an election, you got to go forward with that election and have it, even if you don't like the results, for one thing. But that the rules regulating the election could be delegated at some point to the State Board of Elections. How will you hold your elections? Will you use electronic voting machines? Will you use only paper ballots? Can you use the Scantron sheets? What will you buy in terms of election equipment? What are the hours that the polls will be open? How many polling places are you going to have? Where can you put them? What are the different voting districts going to be like? All the various things, whether or not there can be absentee voting, no excuse absentee voting. Will there be early voting? Will there be, Sunday voting? And of course, the big deal during the pandemic, can you allow for drop boxes, drive-through voting, as much to lower the contact and maintain social distancing during the pandemic. And the claim was all of these things that were decided by the state boards of election. Yes, we will allow people to vote by absentee ballot without an excuse. Yes, we will accept ballots that are postmarked by midnight on election night or whatever it is, those rules. All of those can be delegated, and it always has been the case. But their new theory is, no, unless the state legislature says there can be drop boxes, unless the state legislature says there can be that you will accept ballots postmarked by election day or 3 days after election day or whatever the special rules were that they wanted to use for the pandemic. Unless the state legislature passes that as an act of the state legislature, it is a violation of the federal constitutional provision putting the power to determine the manner of elections in the hands of the state legislatures. And that's just wrong and always has been. It's just not been the understanding of things. But they say if we can get 5 votes to say from now on it will be, then it will be. And that's what they're after. But also after it in another section of the Constitution, which allows the state legislatures to determine the time, place, and manner of electing federal officials for their state. That is to say, their congressional representation as well. That, too, gives them another chance to say only the state legislature can make rules for conducting even elections for other federal offices besides the presidency, and I guess technically vice presidency. So that's where we are. And they also say that will now cover gerrymandering. If the state legislature decides they want gerrymandered districts, even if the state has adopted laws to the contrary that says it will be done in nonpartisan fashion by an outside commission. No, you can't. Those things are all unconstitutional because it says here, manner, time, place, and manner of elections. And that means the boundaries of the districts have to be up to the legislature as well. As Texas and its allied states see things, to return to the article, these clauses teach that only a state's legislature may establish or modify the rules governing who elects the president and other federal offices. All other state non-legislative actors, courts, elections administrators, etc., must abide by those rules, and no others, I should add. The Supreme Court, it really is a Republican Supreme Court, rejected their plea at the time without opining on the merits. That was the point at which I said, manner of election of the electors is all about how will we do it. Election, coin toss, appointment. But weeks later, the January 6th insurrection on the Capitol attempted by brute force what the justices wouldn't do through the force of law. But Republicans did not move on. Quite the opposite. The independent state legislature doctrine has continued to metastasize and grow legs and gain traction in GOP politics. Last month, Kansas Attorney General Derek Schmidt cited it to try to quash a lawsuit challenging a partisan gerrymander that threatens the congressional district of Democratic Representative Sharice Davids. The Elections Clause commits the redistricting power to the state legislatures, and no Kansas law, either statutory or constitutional, gives the state courts any role in evaluating the validity of duly enacted redistricting plans, his office wrote. Also in February, angered by a North Carolina Supreme Court ruling that struck down their aggressive gerrymander, and by the Pennsylvania Supreme Court's work in drawing a new map for its state, Republicans appealed to the U.S. Supreme Court and invoked the independent state legislature doctrine. These courts should not have the authority to intervene in how the GOP-run legislature wants to draw maps and set timetables for elections, they said. This, again, like I said, has never been understood as actual doctrine. It's invented for these purposes just now. But the claim is, no, the founders meant this. Now, we haven't exercised this for any of the 200 and whatever number of years we're up to now since the Constitution was ratified, but they totally meant it and then hid the ball for 200 years. And that's why I bring up the Heller thing. The Heller case, do I have it right? In gun laws in D.C. This was Washington, D.C. banning, handguns inside the city confines. And the argument was, no. The Second Amendment not only creates the right to bear arms, but don't worry about the whole well-regulated militia part. Forget that part. Just read the first clause. And you can see that the Second Amendment establishes the individual's right to bear arms as a personal choice, unrelated to militia service or regulation. And no one had ever really said that before. And, then the NRA began to say it, and they wrote articles about it, and they started advocating it for for 10, 20 years. And it just got to the point where conservatives marinated in that for long enough that eventually there were nominations and confirmations made to the Supreme Court of justices who had marinated in it. And they said, yeah, that will be real. But for 200 years, there was no firmly established individual right to bear arms, concealed weapons on the street for no reason other than for personal interest or, let alone protection. But they created that. That was never the understanding. Yeah, there's gun rights. Yeah, you can do all these things. Yeah, you should, but you should have to get permits and all this. Oh, no, all of that too is illegal because it says shall not be infringed. But you're only reading the first part and the third part. Okay, just read out the second part. That's all. And it just takes 5 justices to say yes to it. And now they're doing the same thing here. This case, the elections case, presents an exceptionally important and recurring question of constitutional law, namely the extent of a state court's authority to reject rules adopted by a state legislature for use in conducting federal elections. Justice Alito wrote in a still dissenting opinion, joined by Justices Clarence Thomas and Neil Gorsuch. There can be no doubt that this question is of great national importance. And in fact, I missed this paragraph here that introduces all of that. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to intervene on Monday, but its more conservative members, led by Alito, signaled loud and clear that the North Carolina case, that they are open to affirming the supremacy of state legislatures in election administration. Alito took issue with the North Carolina Supreme Court for approving a map that the state's General Assembly opposed. And if the language of the elections clause is taken seriously, he wrote, there must be some limit on the authority of state courts to countermand actions taken by state legislatures when they are prescribing rules for the conduct of federal elections, he wrote. In a separate opinion, Brett Kavanaugh agreed that the U.S. Supreme Court needed to settle the matter once and for all. The issue is almost certain to keep arising until the court definitively resolves it, he wrote. In predicting that such a dispute would be on the court's docket sooner rather than later, he effectively invited lawmakers in other cases to continue invoking the doctrine. Now, it's probably true that they would keep pressing the case, but you could just say, yeah, that's not going to fly here. It's not a real doctrine. And then they might stop doing it, or they might try to marinate future justices in this until they can replace the current radicals with future radicals. Amy Coney Barrett didn't add her name to anything. She's the only conservative justice who hasn't yet telegraphed her position on theory, giving her the keys to the future of U.S. elections. And just like that, and remember, that's why she was put on the Supreme Court, according to Trump. Just like that, what once seemed like an esoteric doctrine, now fueled by Trump's plans for a coup, has gained steam and legitimacy, despite a long line of prior Supreme Court cases rejecting it and founding era evidence that the theory is bunk. As voting rights advocates put it in their brief defending the North Carolina plan, the doctrine flouts a century's worth of this court's precedents, some of them only a few years old. One such case, Rucho versus Common Cause, decided in 2019, was otherwise dispiriting to voting rights advocates because it rejected the view that federal courts have authority to adjudicate partisan gerrymandering claims. But that same conservative majority, which included Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, also assured voting rights advocates that they could at least turn to state courts. Provisions in state statutes and state constitutions can provide standards and guidance for state courts to apply, the court said. In other words, the conservative justices made it clear at the time, perhaps to make the bitter pill of their broader ruling easier to swallow, that legislatures don't have free rein to do as they please. They are dependent on their own state constitutions, which may require free and fair elections, give the governor a say, guarantee equal protection of the laws, and are subject to judicial checks. There's a little bit more here, but I don't know if we're going to be able to get to all of it. But it reminds me of something else that I thought I might see if I could cram in here, if I can just bring it up and find it again. Yes. So the idea of marinating future justices in this. I mean, basically all they did here is this was the Kraken theory, and it didn't fly anywhere, and it lost everywhere. But now they've just been repeating it often enough. You know, they keep saying lie, repeat it often enough, will become, whatever. Will become mistaken for truth, we'll say. People will believe it anyway. If you marinate law students and legal activists in it for long enough, when they make it to the Supreme Court, they'll endorse dumb stuff like this. It actually reminded me of a different process in use. Remember the annoying Dave Leonhardt article we read the other day and, briefly took apart. There was a thread that day, and it's been sitting in Pocket ever since, and I want to share it with you. Now it's making the rounds even more online, from Laura Marsh, literary editor at the New Republic, who writes this, she says, very quick thread, and thankfully, hopefully it really will be quick, on using evidence to back up arguments, how it can go badly wrong, and how to spot it, prompted by the latest morning newsletter from the New York Times, and that would be the Leonhardt article. She writes, let's take apart the sourcing for the claim today that social distancing leads to the isolation and disruption that have fed so many problems over the past 2 years, such as vehicle crashes. That one struck me too as, where are you getting at? This is a big claim. The piece links to a source. This is where we might expect to see the reasoning or evidence for it. But wait, the source is a piece by the same author. That under the headline of vehicle crashes surging. Traffic deaths are surging during the pandemic. And Dave Leonhardt reaches the conclusion that they're related, and then points to that later as evidence that they're related. Linking to yourself as a source is a bad practice, but let's see if the linked piece has some hard evidence in it. It starts by noting a trend. Crashes and deaths began surging in the summer of 2020, and again proposes an explanation. An increase in aggressive driving more than made up for the decline in driving. Where's the evidence? This earlier piece links to New York Times reporting. So let's see what evidence that article uses to establish the connection between pedestrian deaths and a surge in reckless driving that its headline suggests. This article should be able to tell us how a surge in reckless driving was measured. It should also establish on what basis someone feeling reckless can be measurably linked to more crashes. But it doesn't. It doesn't cite a study or any kind of data set. It quotes a professor of psychology, human dimensions of organizing and marketing. That's a long title for a professor. This is his opinion, and it's clipped out here. Art Markman, a cognitive scientist at the University of Texas at Austin, said that such emotions partly reflected 2 years of having to stop ourselves from doing things that we'd like to do. We're all a bit at the end of our rope on things, Dr. Markman said. When you get angry in the car, it generates energy. And how do you dissipate that energy? Well, one way is to put your foot down a little bit more on the accelerator. That ain't science right there. It's an idea, but that's it. But that is how one person's opinion, in this case, I guess Dr. Markman's, can form the basis of 3 pieces in a national newspaper. This does not seem to me ideal operating procedure, and I think she's probably right here. But what's the idea here? Why is that related to the piece I was reading about the Supreme Court? Because somebody comes up with this idea for the Kraken lawsuits, that the manner of elections means that you can't have drop boxes just because a state board of elections, which has been delegated the power to set the rules by the state legislature. The state legislature did act. They said, we'll create a state board of elections and they'll have the power to make these decisions. But not only is it not allowable and not, I guess they're trying to use a non-delegation doctrine here to come up with the idea that you're not allowed to delegate those rules. The state legislature has to do everything. But that got rejected because it's never been the case. And all they did was write a bunch of articles saying it is the case. Not so much that it should be the case, but that it is the case. And that we've all been wrong about it and circulate it among themselves and use it over and over again and then cite it themselves over and over again until enough members of the Supreme Court said, I just keep seeing this everywhere. It must actually be true. Or perhaps they just say, maybe they can really see the reality. No one believes this, but if 5 of us say it's true, then it's true. It could be that raw, but I think it's actually just marinating in the stuff until you say, everybody's been saying this. Many people are talking about this.
NetworksRadio.com.
That's where we are.
You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Yes, and that's been your problem up to this point. But now this problem is about to be solved because Justice Putnam is coming with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. What could we possibly have missed? Well, some pundits on Russian state TV called for Putin to end the war as harsh sanctions and growing protests destabilize life in Russia. Watch out for an unstable Russia coming next.